Welcome to Forge and Anvil, where we hammer out hard conversations to sharpen ourselves for the cultural, political, and spiritual war that we are living in. My name is Connor. I am a husband, a father, and a follower of Christ Jesus, just doing my best to represent him well wherever I can. I'm actually joined tonight by a friend it's actually his first time on the show, but we've known each other for quite some time now. David Harris. David, go ahead and just introduce yourself to the audience and those who are not yet familiar with you and what you do.
Sure. I'm also, most importantly, a husband, a father, and a follower of Christ. But I'm also a public school teacher, and I work in a school district in the Upper Cumberland, not too far from you. And before coming to Tennessee, I'm originally from upstate New York, and I moved here 3 years ago, fleeing COVID madness in New York. My wife got fired when she didn't get the vaccine, and we did everything COVID wise. Been there, done that. Got the T-shirt. So figured we had enough. Came down to Tennessee, and I started, along with a few other people, a Christian publication called Truth Script, where I serve as director, and that's in addition to my day job as an English as a second language teacher, which I've done for the past 8 years now.
Awesome. Well, glad to have you on. And yeah, Truth Script's been doing some great work. It's been a while, but I know I've published at least one piece with you guys in the past. So I would encourage my audience to check you guys out if they haven't already. Is this truthscript.com? Is that the URL? Perfect. Yep. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining again, David. So yeah, I had reached out to you. I wanted to talk about this story. This is local to Tennessee, which of course you and I are both Tennessee transplants now. We care a lot about the future of this state. I've been here now for, about 5 years or so. So I've gotten my bachelor's degree in Tennessee living and working on my master's is how I like to put it. But I care a lot about this state, and I know you do as well. And of course, this is talking all about illegal immigration, and that's a subject that's near and dear to both our hearts for reasons I've highlighted in the past. But this is specifically a kind of an update on a 2025 immigration report that was done for the state of Tennessee. So this is actually put out by the Tennessee Conservative. They put out an article on this. So I am reading from their article. This is by Paula Gomez. So feel free to check out Tennessee Conservative News. They always do some great work. So this is from Tennessee Conservative News, a report that details the number and types of crimes committed by illegal aliens present in Tennessee last year shows that over a tenth of all offenses were violent in nature. Many of those arrested were charged with multiple offenses. A total of 169 different offenses were compiled in the report, leading to a total of 21,648 charges, of which 2,183 were violent. According to the 2025 immigration report published by the Tennessee District Attorneys General Conference, 41 Tennesseans died due to either criminal homicide, first-degree murder, second-degree murder, or vehicular homicide committed by individuals who had not been granted permission to be in the United States. So I'll just pause there just to throw it over to you, David, just to get your initial reaction regarding this immigration report for Tennessee.
Unsurprising for me. I work in a career, and I've been very much on the front lines of this issue since I moved to Tennessee, and before that in New York. Those numbers they don't shock me, and even in the slightest. Mostly because I think there's a lot more. I think especially your average red Tennessee voter, probably doesn't realize how many illegal immigrants are in Tennessee. So with a large number, there's going to be a large share of violent crime, and I think the focus tends to be on Memphis, Nashville, and to some degree the Knoxville area, a little less so. But where it often is not is on the small towns throughout the state. So back in December, there was a Tennessee Bureau of Investigation bust at a Mexican restaurant in Smithville, Tennessee. Smithville is a very small town, very, very low population, but there were cartel um, members who were sort of running operations out of this restaurant. They had basically, they were trafficking children. They were involved. Somebody basically what happened was a girl escaped captivity that they had been holding her in, and got to the authorities, and so there was a bunch. And this is in a really tiny town, and you tell people this, and they're really, really surprised. And I think I don't know how much you want me to go into it, but I'll just say this, I guess. I think the strength of Tennessee. I'm saying this. I've only been here for 3 years, so I'm probably still working on my bachelor's in Tennessee living. But the strength of Tennessee, especially on a political level, is its small towns and its municipalities. Right. The reason why Tennessee has not gone blue to the degree that like Georgia has, even, and the way a state like California, New York, Pennsylvania, and now Virginia, why these states go blue so quickly is because you have these large urban areas that are able to control the state through just just the numbers. There's so many people in a couple of small urban areas, small as far as land is concerned. Tennessee, the population is very much distributed throughout the state in these small towns, and the small towns are almost universally hardcore red. So I think this is true with transplants, and it's also true with locals who have been here forever. There tends to be kind of an assumption that, well, that kind of stuff doesn't go on here because we're in that country here. No, it does, and it is, and a lot of this stuff is going on in places that you wouldn't expect. It's going on right down the road from you, and those dangers, they're not relegated to Memphis or Nashville or Knoxville. Like, they're potentially in your backyard if you pay attention to them. So that would be my reaction, I guess.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, there is a sort of, I don't want to say apathy, because apathy would be a poor choice of words, but there's just sort of a disconnect, not realizing that that this stuff is trickling out. It might take some time. Obviously, we're not going to be hysterical and pretend that we're as bad off as New York City, but of course, it does take time. But these things are seeping into these rural communities and these small towns. And it was just about a month ago, I think, at this point, maybe a little more, where an individual from Putnam County, Tennessee, was killed in a car crash due to an illegal driving. And it's just because the individual basically did not know how to drive properly. And this is just something where we're not necessarily, there's horrible instances like the ones that you highlighted, where there's literal cartel members operating out of a small town in Red, Tennessee. But it's not always those huge convoluted things where it's sort of almost like the stereotype of what you think of when Republicans rail against immigration. Sometimes it's just the simple things, just an individual who probably couldn't read the street signs properly because they maybe don't know their English properly, or maybe they were given a license under the table. They weren't given the full testing that typical U.S. citizen goes through in order to get their driver's license, happened to crash into a Tennessee citizen who is now no longer with us on this earth because of that individual was let in. And at the end of the day, they're always just preventable crimes that are happening here. So that's one of the things that I wanted to discuss tonight, as well as, I'm seeing this exact same report that I sent to you is being framed up by other local Nashville outlets. And they're saying how this immigration report is showing that only 2% of crimes in Tennessee are caused by illegals, and the majority of them are traffic violations, is what I believe one of the outlets worded it like that. I think it was traffic violations or something to that effect. And what they're not showing when they say traffic violations, they're not actually talking about the seriousness of the traffic violations. So I guess my first point is to say that local outlets in Tennessee, Nashville news stations, are incredibly liberal, and they don't play it up as strongly as, let's say, a CNN, right? because they recognize that they are in a red state. And so what they do is they just try to poison the well a little bit at a time by not being completely honest. So those traffic violations that this outlet was talking about, for example, 2,920 of those were DUIs. So when you hear them reporting that only 2% of crimes in the state of Tennessee are done by illegals, and most of them are from traffic violations, you're naturally thinking, okay, running a red light, not stopping properly at a stop sign, speeding. No, that's DUIs. And of course, that can lead to vehicular manslaughter and a whole bunch of other larger issues down the path from the DUIs. So I don't know if you've seen any of this reporting, David, but what's your take on that?
Whenever you bring up this has basically become the tactic, I think, on the left. Anytime you bring up any crime committed by an illegal immigrant in any situation, it doesn't matter what the crime is, you immediately will get, yes, but look at these percentages as a pool of the population. That's a red herring. I think conservatives should reject that immediately and strongly whenever they hear it, because ultimately that has nothing to do with has nothing to do with the conversation, because any crime committed by an illegal immigrant is a crime that did not need to happen. It was a crime that was basically allowed to happen, permitted to happen, but now you're dealing with a double illegality, because first there's the presence of the one who committed the crime, and then there's the crime itself. So the issue is the illegality, because if I did you say 20,000 or 2,000 DUIs?
It was 2,920, so almost 3,000.
Okay, yeah, 20,000 sounded a little bit high just because our population is not that big. But 2,000, you figure it's, Tennessee's a mid-range in size. It's a mid-sized state. There's only a few million people in the state. 2,000, that's not relegated to Memphis, Nashville, and Knoxville. Just because you're not around a city where the pool of those populations tend to be does not mean that that's not something that you can affect. You just mentioned Putnam County. Interstate 40 runs right through the heart of Tennessee. It goes from Memphis to Knoxville, then branches out and then goes over to North Carolina. Everybody travels that road all the time. I live pretty close to Interstate 40. I think about this all the time because my wife, if you live in rural Tennessee, anywhere close to 40, then you are you're using 40 all the time. To get anywhere, really. Just to go to the grocery store, if you're in a rural area, then you have to get on 40. So everybody's using 40. And it's not just, I think we could focus on the illegal immigrants who actually live in Tennessee. That's one number. But remember, California has been giving out these licenses at basically like candy. They haven't really vetted anybody. They've just been giving them out. And those Interstate 40 is one of the main thoroughfares of shipping in the United States. So those trucks that are going by all the time, you don't know if the guy driving that truck can read English. You don't know if they remember. A lot of the places that these folks come from are very chaotic, but places where I've driven a bit in third world countries. It's a very different kind of driving. The rules are not really followed. It's a completely different paradigm when it comes to driving. So people who are used to that kind of driving, you're basically just asking for accidents. Some car like India is, I forget, I don't remember what the number is, but the number of traffic fatalities is like staggering, tens and tens and tens of thousands that they experience yearly, and it's just kind of part of life. But we don't really think of it that way because we have a rule-based, higher trust society where you are meant to follow the rules, you're meant to read the signs, you're meant to obey the law. So it gives me a lot of disconsternation to think of my family driving on these roads all the time. Yeah. I have like that app on my phone whenever if my wife has to go to Knoxville or Cookeville or somewhere, to go to Costco or Publix, something that we don't have where I live. And I'm looking at that app and I'm just thinking, I'm just praying. I hope she makes it. I hope that, she's not one of these victims. So yeah, I mean, it's something that worries me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I did a previous episode on specifically the immigration bills that are being proposed and worked on in the Tennessee state legislature. But I had Mark Krikorian on, and he's from the Center for Immigration Studies, and he's been doing this long before you and I were ever in the political scene. And of course, he was going through some of these facts with me, and one of the ones that I had heard recently, and he confirmed this, was that I believe it was 51% of all driver's license in the state of New York were being given illegally to illegals. And so it's to your point, you mentioned California, there's New York, there's California, there's so many of these big populous states that are giving out. I mean, I don't remember if it was 51% of all CDLs or if it was 51% of all license across the board, but regardless, that's in the state of New York, that's got to be hundreds of thousands of licenses. And then these individuals, if they're long haul truck drivers, they're going to go, to your point, all across the state of Tennessee while they're traveling from coast to coast. And so you genuinely do not know when you are going to be by someone who does not know how to drive properly. And of course, we can talk about statistics, how it's a small percentage all day long. But at the end of the day, the greater point is that these are all preventable crimes. And so well, we're talking about how there's 41 Tennesseans that were killed due to illegal immigrants, some by intentional, willful murder, some just by accidents, like the one who was killed in the accident here in Putnam County. Regardless, that is 41 people that are no longer on this earth in the state of Tennessee because we have illegals, because our country is not properly enforcing its immigration laws. And so at the end of the day, it's just 41 preventable deaths. Now, you're never going to abolish murder. You're never going to abolish death. The death rate is still 100% for every single person. And you and I are no exception to that. But at the end of the day, if you're not going to enforce laws that are already on the books, you're just going to continue to allow these unnecessary deaths to keep occurring. And that's ultimately what the whole battle over immigration is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about one very small slice of this pie, because traffic fatalities is just one area of preventable crime. But we're not even touching the cost and the strain of illegal immigration financially on the state, what taxpayers are shelling out. And you're from California, I'm from New York, so we move here and we feel like, you feel this huge burden lifted off you, because it is such a freer place. You feel that every time you do your car registration, or you pay your or you don't pay your state income tax. So there's lots of things that I think make people, especially transplants, feel like, man, this is just so much freer in terms of like taxes and economic responsibility. But we're still paying a lot. We have 10% sales tax. We have a number of other taxes that are subsidizing. Nobody has really calculated like a robust number for how much illegal immigrants are costing the state of Tennessee. But I know from my field alone, it's probably over $1 billion. And that's I think that's a conservative estimate. And I can get to $500 million just based on some statistics in my particular field. So this, what I would call a crisis, this illegal immigration crisis, is costing us dramatically, which is why I'm actually somewhat optimistic about the legislature this year, that they're actually trying to tackle it, which is giving me a lot of hope.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been hounding our legislatures for a while on this podcast, and I've given them a lot of grief over the years. But at the end of the day, it's just because I really just want to see Tennessee continue to be the conservative example that it already is. I just want to see it lead even more. But to their great credit, I mean, Cameron Sexton, he's been doing great stuff on immigration, and I am incredibly thrilled to see it. So, I appreciate the speaker really stepping it up this year as far as the immigration bills, and working with Stephen Miller and doing some important things, because we sorely need it, and I will just continue to sing the praises of these state legislatures all day long when they're taking this necessary action. So another shout out to them. I wanted to talk a bit about the high school walkouts that we've seen, because we've seen quite a few of these across the state. Now, Putnam County had Cookeville High School. They actually just recently had a walkout where around 30 students or so walked out in order to protest ICE. But I've seen a few others in the Nashville area. I want to say I saw one in Murfreesboro area. But either way, there's been quite a few popping up all across the state.
Knoxville had quite a bit of that going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're seeing these high school students specifically going out and protesting, and it's happening all across the nation. Of course, it's a trend, and I'm sure some schools are having different school administrators are probably encouraging it. According to, I know the Cookeville High School one, it was widely reported that the faculty was not in support of it. They basically just stayed neutral as much as you can. But regardless, we're seeing these high schoolers walking out, and I know for a fact that in the greater Upper Cumberland area, a lot of the local Democrat candidates have been courting these individuals and trying to get them engaged now with the Democratic Party in the area, and they're meeting with these high schoolers that are doing these walkouts. So, what's your read overall, I guess, on these high school walkouts, David?
I don't want to just say it doesn't surprise me all throughout, but it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me a lot. I think wherever you have a even moderately urban center, this is going to go on, because you're going to have a significant share of that illegal population in the school, and the Democrats have kind of, it's one of those funny issues where it's almost like the Republicans and the Democrats, at least the voters, like agree with each other. One is saying you just want all the illegals out, and one's saying yeah we do, and it's like, okay, they just are on opposite sides of, they're not even like necessarily misrepresenting each other a lot. It's just like we have an absolute disagreement about this, but it's an existential disagreement. It's like the difference between having a community and not having a community. So this isn't really going to go on in most of the rural counties, simply because the students who would participate in this would just be too much outnumbered, and the administration would put a clamp down on it immediately. So I don't think we're going to see this very much in most rural areas, with probably a few exceptions. Shelbyville, Tennessee is probably has one of the highest, at least per capita, illegal immigration rates in the state. That particular town has just drawn a ton of illegal immigration. But and there's a few other towns. Lenore City, I believe, is number 2 outside of Knoxville. But you really have a situation where there's a significant percentage sometimes in the high schools of students who either are illegal immigrants, because if you look at videos of these, you're mostly going to see Latino kids. That's mostly what you're going to see. And so either they are illegal themselves, or they kind of see this as an identity thing. Like, well, because that's kind of how the Democrats have, I guess that would be the misrepresentation, because they're trying to make it specifically a race thing. But it just so happens that the overwhelming share of illegal immigrants in Tennessee are of Latino origin: Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras. So there's sort of like, there's two sides. There's the students who actually are legal, and then there's the students who kind of see it as their identity. And so to them, they're going out and they're representing their identity. It's just Mexican flags. That's basically what you see. You see a bunch of kids and they're walking out holding Mexican flags. So I think you'll see a bunch of other students in these protests who are, they're in high school, they're being indoctrinated by some teachers. That is just the way that it is. Progressive leftists see themselves as evangelists, so they go to where they can form minds. And so you're always going to find, even in rural communities in Tennessee, you'll find progressive teachers. I've met them in every district I've worked in. Even really, really rural schools, that's where they will go, because that's where they can have influence and impact. And they will have influence. it's much smaller in rural areas, but if the population's a little bigger, then you get more. There's probably also kids who just any excuse to, not be in school, they'll take that too. They're just kind of, because you always see a bunch of kids like kind of just walking around and just loitering, like they're just kind of there along for the ride. But it's a big test on administrators, on school administrators. And if it's allowed, like as far as I know in Knoxville, some of these protests have sort of been encouraged by administration. That tells you that tells you where the school's at. That tells you it's kind of a hostile institution within the greater community. And that's just the truth of the matter. So, it's in some ways it's concerning. It depends where you are, I think, and how big of an impact those subversive forces within the school system are having. But it'll probably get more intense the more if these bills do pass and illegal immigration is cracked down on Tennessee. And I've been told by legislatures, like to my face, prominent legislatures in Tennessee, that Tennessee is going to be a place that is hot. I was told this a few weeks ago. Tennessee is going to be a place that's hostile to illegal immigrants. They're gonna end up leaving because we're gonna make it too difficult to stay here, which was a great thing to hear. But there are still a lot here.
Yeah. And I'd love to see it, because at the end of the day, we don't want to keep seeing that 41 number, climb. We don't want to see these DUIs go up. We don't want to see, the 2%, that we have here of crimes being committed by illegals. We don't want to see that number go up at all. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I do feel for these high school students, because at the end of the day, I think that there's a lot of emotional manipulation. You've already alluded to some of it. The left is trying to very much make this a race thing, and you and I both know it's not a race thing. It's a matter of law and order. We actually want our immigration laws to be respected. We want them to mean something. But at the end of the day, like, I think a lot of these individuals are not seeing the full picture, because it's never presented to them. And I'm just speaking for myself. I don't want to pretend that high school kids are ignorant and stupid. They get talked down to enough. But I do know for myself, when I was in high school, I was not paying very much attention to politics and how it truly affects me. And then you get into the real world and you start to see, just how much these things do impact you. And I know personally many individuals who have graduated from college, some of them from Tennessee Tech even, which is close to that same walkout that I described a moment ago, not too terribly far from me. I know individuals who are getting their degree in computer programming and, these nice functional degrees. We're not talking about underwater basket weaving, and they still just cannot find work because, there are immigrants that are basically taking their jobs, or their jobs are being shipped overseas and things of that nature. So the America First agenda, broadly speaking, is not one that lacks empathy. It's just a matter of where we're directing our sympathy, Go ahead.
If it's all right. So Tennessee, and you may have found this to be true as well. You've been here longer than I have, but one of the really special things about Tennessee is the number of high school students who go to college in Tennessee and then live the rest of their lives in Tennessee. Being from New York, that's just not the way it is. Most high school students, they graduate, I'd say probably 50% go to another state to go to college. If they're Christian, they'll go to Liberty or Cedarville or even like Masters University in California, somewhere like that. Tennessee, like, I think pretty much every young person I've met who has graduated college, who's from Tennessee, all of them, like almost without exception, went to UT or Tennessee Tech, all of them. And then when they are looking for work, they don't generally go to another state. They generally stay in Tennessee. Now, they might be in Knoxville or Nashville. Maybe they're from a small town somewhere, but they still tend to, like, there's a generational continuity in Tennessee that is very unique in being compared to other states in our country. So as you have more competition for the jobs that do exist. And Tennessee's in a good place in a lot of ways because there's so much investment coming in that there's jobs created here that are not getting created other places. So there's a lot of things to be positive about, I think. But when you have a population that is devaluing the wages that you could earn, there's a lot of jobs that now that are not really open to you because you can't get by. You can't live even the sort of baseline Tennessee lifestyle by working those jobs. So you wind up sort of with this like illegal underclass, and this is going on in like most small towns in Tennessee. We're not special in that regard. It's pretty much the whole country, but it's going on here too. That's one part of it. The other part is because of the high presence of illegal immigrant students in Tennessee public schools, the high school diploma is greatly undervalued. Just for some numbers, so I work in the English as a second language field. So I teach students how to habla English, and 10% of Tennessee public school students are in an ESL program. So they're enrolled they're basically identified as not having achieved proficiency in the English language. 10%. So a lot of people don't know this, but the way that program basically works, the way that our field works is if you're classified as in the process of learning English, you can't really fail classes and you will just get pushed on to the next grade until you graduate. When you graduate, there'll basically be a little asterisk, did not test out of ESL, like did not learn English, did not like demonstrate proficiency in the English language, but you still get the diploma. So if 10% of our students qualify basically for high school graduation, if they don't know how to speak English, you have this two-tiered system where either you like are in high school and you work hard and you get good grades, or you just don't know how to speak the language and you get the same diploma. So it undervalues it undermines the value of a high school diploma in Tennessee. So there's a number of things that make it challenging for young people, especially high school students, as they are entering the job market. And unfortunately, the whole situation is exacerbated by the presence of illegal immigrants.
Yeah, well said. And at the end of the day, like we want these, these young people, especially, I have such a heart for the young people of America, and I know you do as well, because you and I are at that age where we're no longer the young people, but we're just a little bit above where we used to be called the young people. Still occasionally called the young people, depending upon who's talking to us. But you and I are in the building a family stage where we're married and we're having kids, and we're doing our best to provide for them. And at the end of the day, like I see these individuals who are even just 5, 10, 15 years younger than me, and they're beginning to enter into late high school or early college or graduating college and heading into the workforce, and there's no jobs, or at least there's no good paying jobs, and they're struggling to buy a home. They're struggling to find a spouse, to get married, to have kids, and to do all these things that were assumed as just generational norms that everyone was going to go through, prior to a couple decades back. And we've seen, I'm sure, speaking for myself, as someone who's barely a millennial, almost Gen Z, I'm seeing among my age group peers that are still unmarried, or a lot of them are married, but they just can't afford a home, and both spouses are working because both spouses have to work because of the economic realities. And at the end of the day, if, just to use the figure that you mentioned earlier, especially since it's a conservative figure, if $1 billion of Tennessee tax money is going towards illegal immigrants, then at the end of the day, no one's trying to be racist or harsh or, all the other accusations that are thrown out, lacking a heart, by enforcing these immigration laws. At the end of the day, I care enough about the people that have entered the country legally and done it the right way. I care about the people that were born here and are 3 or 4 generations deep, or transplants like you and I. I care about those individuals, and I care about their ability to find a job and find opportunities. And at the end of the day, if someone is cutting in line, so to speak, in order to undermine those opportunities, that's not okay, and it's unjust. And that's, at the end of the day, that's why, again, it's not a race issue, it's a law and order issue. And I know I'm speaking to I'm preaching to the choir when I'm saying that to you, but I'm making sure that the case is laid out for any listeners who maybe haven't heard the case before.
Yeah, and being transplants, there's been a lot of well, not a lot, but there's an undercurrent of butting heads, maybe a little bit of animosity that goes on, I think, between locals and transplants, even within, the sort of red state framework. So we're all conservatives and stuff, but, and I get it, we moved in, prices went up. There's, and it's a cultural thing too. I'm from New York. I have done my best to try to integrate, and I want my kids to be Tennesseans, and so there's a banjo on my wall, and somebody's going to get offended that I said that. But what I would love, what I try to impart upon people is that all of us have a much bigger threat that's breathing down our necks, and it's the high number of illegal immigrants in the state that don't really, by and large, they don't care about the cultural differences that we have. They don't care about the squabbles that we might have over, how they do things where I come from versus how they do things here. They have their own culture, and they want to live in that culture. They want to perpetuate that culture. They want it to grow. And in many places throughout the state, it is almost to the point that what was there becomes unrecognizable. But we kind of have to unite and face this threat, and then we can get back to squabbling about all the other stuff. But we have to deal with this first. Like, this is a much more of an existential threat to our American way of life. Very basic, just faith, family, freedom, as everybody who runs for office in Tennessee likes to say.
Yeah,
should have guns in there too, but.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, to quote the great Charlie Kirk, immigration without assimilation is invasion. And at the end of the day, what you're really saying is that transplants like you and I, we're coming here because we already loved Tennessee. We already believed, while looking at all the other states, you and I did our research and we saw that Tennessee already aligned most of our values. And then we move here and are doing our best to assimilate. Even my kids, they're around some of their neighbors that were born and raised here. Occasionally, my kids, they'll have that Southern slang, and they'll have that Southern drawl in their tone, and it's because we're trying our best to genuinely be Tennesseans, and we've sort of burned the ship, so to speak. This is it. We're here to make Tennessee the best that it can be, and we're doing our best to learn from locals and make sure that we're not doing it in a way where we're carpet bagging and trying to turn it into our idea of utopia. We want to keep Tennessee, but that's just it. We are assimilating. Meanwhile, what you're really describing here is there's a whole other group of people that are immigrating without assimilating. They're invading. Culturally invading, whatever disclaimer you want to add to that. But at the end of the day, they don't care. They don't care about your Tennessee volunteers. They don't care about your Southern drawl. They're just here to take and to move on. And I'm sure there's some great individuals that are truly the left-wing stereotype, where they're just an individual that left a hard situation in order to find a better life. I'm sure there are some of that. There's some of that out there as well. But at the end of the day, if one culture is coming here and they're refusing to give up their culture, and they're just doing their best to make sure that more people from their culture comes over, at the end of the day, it's not going to be Tennessee in a couple generations.
Well, one really quick point on that, and I just say this as somebody who's very close to, we're not really supposed to ask, so I don't always know the legal I don't know the legal status a lot of the time of like the people that I've worked with over the last few years. But It's like all of you showed up in 2021. It's kind of not hard to figure out. But this process of illegal immigration is not good for the immigrants themselves. And we get that stereotype constantly. And I say this as somebody who's very close to this issue, who spends most of my days working amongst this population. There's kind of a stereotype of, well, the hardworking immigrant. They're talking about illegal immigrants, but they're just trying to get a better life. And usually you see is like two parents, they love each other, and all of the examples that you get of it are, look at this family. Look, that he was ripped away from his wife, and she was ripped away from her husband. I have encountered, and with hundreds of families that I've worked with, I've encountered, probably count on one hand, an intact family because of the lifestyle of immigration. Normally what happens is the father or the mother will come here and they will work for a while, and they'll send money back to Honduras or back to Guatemala or wherever it is. And then they will, bring the family over at some point. Well, while they're here, the family breaks apart. Father has kids with somebody else, or the mother does that back in Honduras or something. And, they have kids that they share. But what the whole process leads to is basically a ton of family dysfunction. And because they kind of operate outside of our legal system, there's a lot of abuse. There's also a lot of people who are like in debt to the cartels. So they're slaving themselves. They're basically cartel slaves. They're trying to pay back this debt of what it took to get here when the coyotes brought them over. So this whole situation is not good for the illegal immigrants themselves either. It actually is. It's actually a pretty discompassionate system that we have going on. It's not good for them. They may have more, like maybe they got like access to healthcare that they didn't have back where they come from, or maybe they have more money. Okay, but money is not, like, family is more important than money. Values are more important than money. That's something that I love for people to understand, that this thing is negative all the way around. It's not good for the people who are taking advantage of it. It's also not good because they're then taking advantage of the people of Tennessee.
Yeah, well said. That's an important thing to add on. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the system's broken. The immigration system is very broken, and you don't have to be in love with every single proposal that's being thrown out there for how we can fix it. At the end of the day, though, I just think the important thing is recognizing that those of us who are advocating for drastic change are not doing so lightly, and because we don't have a heart. At the end of the day,
compassion. We have the moral high ground on this. We are the compassionate ones. If you are an advocate for security, for for immigration law that's just normal across the earth, you have the moral high ground. There's no reason to feel guilty or feel bad about it. Now, you don't have to be flippant about it. Some people are flippant. You can still feel bad. You can have sympathy, but advocating for law and order is a biblical construct. It's nothing to be ashamed of.
Mm-hmm. Amen to that. Awesome. Well, David, I appreciate it. I think we'll go ahead and end it there. I appreciate you joining, though, and having this discussion. Where can people go to keep up with you and everything that you have going on?
You can find me on X. David Scott Harris is my handle. I just put random musings out there. Sometimes I write on Substack, but the main place would be truthscript.com. I'm the editor for that publication. Check our stuff out, send something around, that'd be great.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining, David, and thank you, listener. Really appreciate you tuning in. We'll be back next week with another episode for you, but until then, hope you have a great day, great evening, great morning whenever you're listening to this podcast. Appreciate it. We'll see you next time.